Turns out no, I had the flu last month. I also had the stomach bug at the exact same time.
Double whammy.
Dr. Greg apparently had run through his house already. He's like, yeah, just stay home.
Wait, let's see.
No, he said some people it hangs on for.
A lot of.
Yep.
That seems like everybody's got something different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stomach,
good.
head.
Mm.
Yeah, crazy.
All right, I got 7 o'clock. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Thank everyone for coming out. First order of business is our reorganization planning commission. Currently, Tim Reith is the secretary. What's your name again? Alex Almer is the vice chairman and I'm the chairman. Any ideas on this? What's your pleasure, fellows?
I would like to propose that we continue the same roster for 2024. All parties willing to go along with that?
I concur.
Vote on that, make a second on that.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thanks, guys. All right, this next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our December meeting. Corrections, concerns? If not, I'd look for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the December 12th meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'll abstain.
Alex abstains. He was not at the last meeting. All right, motion carries. All right, before we move on, just one announcement. Debbie, you're the only audience member. Well, we do have someone else. If you want to make public comment, we're going to ask that you use the podium and a microphone because our microphone system does not pick up from the shared area. So, what's that? No, it never really was a rule, but it is now, I guess. Yeah, because we can't pick it up and can't see it on the video or hear it on the videos. Okay, that being said, we'll move on. Select Properties, Holiday House Road.
Good evening. I'm Greg Edelman here on behalf of Select. If the Planning Commission was so willing, I'd like to reverse the order of the projects and go 3, 2, 1 instead of 1, 2, 3. I just think it's more simple that way. The third one, as Steve will attest to, is really just a lot line or, as Steve had said, an annexation of portions of 2 properties off Tower Road. And yes, put it up. We're looking at a 2.24 acre swap for a 2.32 acre swap. The landowner just wants to basically realign these 2 parcel boundary lines, and based upon this overall reshading and redistribution of the lot areas for his own personal preference and planning purposes at this point. There's really nothing more to it. We did get a review letter from Steve's office on it, which was dated the 4th.
Yeah.
We're happy to go through those comments, but they're pretty administrative, as this plan is pretty administrative.
Is there anything that jumps out here, Steve?
No, nothing really jumps out. It's pretty straightforward. The single issue is we had a prior subdivision plan for the property, and does this impact that plan in any way, or is that plan now on hold and we'll come back at some future?
Yeah, it's on hold. We'll have to come back on that. I think you saw something previously showing some development of these properties, but now we're reorienting the lot lines, which will then readjust what we'll have to come in with.
So you intend to approve with this plan?
Yes,
Future subdivision plan.
that's correct. That's right.
And this is only
Correct.
it will have to come back
It-
through the process.
It will have to go through the formal process. That's right. Right. We just wanted to bring it in, get your first blush and look at it.
No action needed this evening.
No, I think all of these are sketch plans this evening, if I'm not mistaken. So, but yeah, we just thought it would be prudent for us to follow the normal process here at the township with anything. Come in with the sketch, so that way you don't see it the first time and say, well, what about this? What about that? So that's it on that application, unless there's any other questions from the.
I have no clue.
I'm just concerned about what's next.
Right.
Right.
Well, we all have that concern.
I understand that as well. And
This is
we'll have to
setting
come,
yourselves up for this,
right. We'll come back with what's next and then we can get into those specifics.
All right.
So if we go to the second one, which is the Augustine Road. I think this is the first time the planning commission has seen this proposed layout. So we're talking about a proposed 9 single-family home lots with a cul-de-sac, open space to the rear of the property. We're looking at lot sizes of 12,000 square feet minimum. Lot 1 being 14,522. Everything else is around 12,000 plus or not minus, just plus. Pretty simple layout. Stormwater basin is towards the rear as you go down gradient. We did have a sketch plan review on this, which was also, I think, dated. Sorry, that's dated the 6th, right?
December 6th.
yes.
Right. So, and we're happy to go through that as well with the planning commission, and Brian Falk, our project engineer, is here as well to answer any questions you might have on the sketch plan layout. But I don't know if Steve wanted to highlight any issues that he wanted to discuss this evening.
I don't need to highlight anything. I think we're gonna get back around to the same question.
Right. And that's it. It's funny because when we were prepping for it this evening, that was the first thing that came out of Brian Grant's mouth. And we said, obviously, we have to come back in for a planning module. One of the things we're looking at is looking at all of the different properties for select and focusing on sewer planning for those properties. So this one would obviously be included in that overall sewage facilities planning module.
Is there any waivers you're going to be looking for on this project?
We don't believe so. Obviously, we have to fully engineer the plan
Right.
and get a total review. But as of now, no, we do not anticipate any.
So aside from the sewer and water, we're not dealing with any hiccups on this project.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty basic, small 9-lot subdivision. So there's not much to it. But you're right. The infrastructure is probably the critical path.
So is it your intent to comply with the fact that you're in the Telford zone with this project?
Well, yeah, and that's you're talking about the sanitary sewer area. And that's our understanding, is that we have to have a larger discussion on whether this actually can be serviced by that designated district based upon the current state of affairs with respect to the sewer provider. So the sewer planning module will deal with all of those issues in greater detail, and then come through the planning commission for your component, as well as through the supervisors for their review. After we get through a completeness review from your engineer as well as the authority. So we've got a lot of steps to get through to be able to answer that question in more detail.
So we won't see this plan again until we have some answers on the sewer and water issues.
Probably.
We would.
I'm looking over there to see what they're going to do.
Wait, let me
I would agree with you.
make it as a statement. We
I-
would prefer to not see this again until we have some more answers on sewer and
Yeah,
water.
I would agree with you, but what, Brian? But parallel paths. Yeah. They'll be in, a planning module will be in.
Right.
We're anticipating and in the process of putting it together. So that way it will be coming to the township. I think what Brian's saying is we may still move forward, just like any other preliminary plan. It's supposed to be conditioned upon getting sewer. But it's prudent for us to figure out that answer sooner rather than later, because we're the ones who spend the engineering dollars on a preliminary plan anticipating sewer. So we will certainly be addressing that issue.
Anybody have any questions for Brett?
Steve, are there any issues down at that end of Augustine with drainage or anything?
Not for that development. It's
Okay.
further down the road, we've got some issues. I think there is 1 or 2 items that were in my letter that we warrant some discussion. One is more on the applicant side. I think there's some zoning issues with that existing structure and the setback line. I'll have to clarify that on preliminary.
Okay.
As far as what part of a porch could extend into yard setbacks. If you do intend to
Keep it.
maintain that dwelling on that.
Right.
that lot. And the other, I think, is worthy of some discussion, just the street width and parking on one side, both sides or not.
Right.
Before they fully engineer the plan and then you have to change it later, possibly. Change it later.
Right, and we're not proposing parking on either sides of the street. You know, obviously we design this and have it offered for dedication, whether it is or it isn't, it's up to the township. Oh, I'm sorry. My mistake. Right. That's a 46-foot right of way as well, which I think is what's required, right?
That with the 20. Side.
Right. Okay. Steve, usually when you have a cul-de-sac bulb, though, it's typically no parking in the bulb, right? Or is that permitted? All right, well, I was just going to say, because here you actually have a decent area of the cul-de-sac bulb that backs up to open space. So you might be able to put some parking in the back there too as well. I don't think it snows here anymore. Just rains. Rains a lot. All we need is a big inlet going to the basin. But okay, I mean,
Both sides of that basement.
they'll spray it up into the air. All right, well, we'll look at that. I was also anticipating you saying with any type of fire truck turning radii and things like that, we'd actually have to make sure that complies. I believe it's to the required radii around the cul-de-sac, the turning area.
Yeah, I didn't notice anything.
Okay.
And we have enough parking with just on one side of the street?
That's my understanding. Yes, we comply. I mean, we have the on lot that will provide as well as the parking on one side.
But if there's no parking in the bulb, you're really only talking about parking for 4 houses.
Well, I think you're talking about which side's on the right-hand side as we come in, right, Brian? Right, so it goes down the straight all the way up to right before it curves, probably. And then you've got the driveways wherever they're going to be placed as being a determining factor as well. So I don't know what the total number is. Did you have an analysis?
So I'm saying, I mean, it looks like the on-street parking would only serve for the
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood what
6,
you
7, 8,
said.
9 would be the only people that would be potentially parking.
4 and 5 may also use it because their access would be from inside the bulb.
Right, but I think you just said no parking within the.
Right, but people might park on the street and then walk to lots 4 or
That's
5.
true.
Whereas I wouldn't anticipate, the ones that take access from Augustine Road.
Yeah.
So, but we'd have to lay out the driveway curb cuts in order to determine how many spaces could fit there. And then there's also probably some area by the intersection, from the intersection on back, where you can't park, obviously, for clear sight purposes.
And then for lots 1, 2, and 3, you propose parking on August.
I don't know if we even talked about that. I don't think so. I think it would just be on lot.
When you indicated no waiver, so you would be no widening. Surface sidewalk on. Depending on that widening, it might actually be adequate. To have.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether we designated that. I don't even know if we have the right to do that. I think wouldn't that be, township would have to then approve because it'd be in the public right away, whether
Yeah,
there's parking there.
that's
Yeah,
no parking like that.
right. Right. So, but yes, we would have to do the requisite frontage improvements. Unless we got a waiver, which we're not asking for at this point. Right? looking to my left. Don't hear anything different, so. I could, so then we're not going to ask for it. All right, moving on to the one that probably has more questions.
Give me.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah,
Is
sure.
everybody satisfied with the discussion on this? Clear enough for now?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I do is really guidance for the developer to actually develop a plan. Obviously, natural resources, open space, everything all have to be checked out.
Right.
Yeah, it could be that they lose a lot or have to shift lots around to meet some standards, but it's a fairly open, relatively level property right now.
Okay.
All right, go ahead with Holiday House.
Holiday House. I don't know, Brian, you want to come up and do this one? You have a little more background since this one's been in front of the planning commission before and has changed again. You want to give a highlight of what's new and hopefully improved?
Good evening. All right, this is the Holiday House development. I think previously this plan was submitted. What the revised plan is showing currently is an age-restricted development with townhomes, 30 townhomes, single access off a Holiday House Road with public water and sewer. Sewer connection being an easement extending to the Recreation Authority across the street. I'll just give you a little update on that. I guess there was some discussion that easement had expired, that they already obtained, and we have had a meeting with them to renew that easement and re-up it. So that is in the works right now. It hasn't been finalized yet, but we have had those discussions. Along with that discussion, I know previously one of the issues or concerns here was cul-de-sac length, and that Holiday House Road is essentially a cul-de-sac, and that we'd be adding units off the cul-de-sac. So one of the discussion items was providing a second emergency access from Holiday House through the recreation facility. Did bring some handouts. Shows the easement of the page down. All right, that's what we have proposed or had preliminary discussions with the Recreation Authority about providing a second access, emergency access from Holiday House Road in through their parking lot. Again, that's just preliminary discussions with them. That's our concept to help alleviate some of the concerns of cul-de-sac length. We will be providing that second access there. Now moving internal to the site, we do have a single access drive connection to Holiday House, and then we have a second emergency access drive, which would be just grass pavers at this point for emergency vehicles only. I'll call it the P loop in the middle. We designed that and have laid that out as a parking lot, not as a street. In Steve's review, he refers to some of the street standards, street widths. The P loop, obviously we don't meet P loop standards of your ordinance. It's essentially similar to if it was an apartment building with a parking lot in it. With those parking spaces in the middle, you're going to have vehicles backing out on and off of it. So we have designed it and laid it out as if it's just a parking lot. And the driveways to the units, while they would most likely go to a garage, are really going to function as off-street parking spaces off of that driveway. So the access is just a 24-foot wide aisle with two-way traffic as is required by a parking lot design. We did have some discussions about possibly reducing that to a one-way around the loop. But try to save on some impervious, since it seems to make some sense in this configuration. But that was just some discussions internal. I don't know if the planning commission has any thoughts or preferences on that idea as well. Stormwater is going to be underground bed in the middle. We are up against some environmental issues with woodland disturbance on this one. So that's forcing our need to go with the underground bed in the middle of the development instead of a conventional surface basin. And sidewalk, yes, the walk around the parking lot, we do show a sidewalk walking around. What we've proposed is an 8-foot wide walk that function as both the sidewalk and the walking trail. Your ordinance requires that the open space have a walking trail within the open space. Technically, this trail is not wouldn't technically be in the open space. So it's something we wanted to discuss tonight on your thoughts. I don't know how much leeway you have. It's a zoning ordinance requirement, so something I'll have to defer to Steve on his thoughts on that. If a separate trail needs to be installed, and is it really worth it for these 30 units to have a separate trail and sidewalk? Maybe we add the trail and take the sidewalk away. I don't know, but that's what we wanted to talk about tonight before we get into detailed engineering of it. I think that's it.
That is a zoning ordinance issue, not.
The zoning ordinance requires the trail within the open space. So I guess the discussion with the planning commission is, do you still want sidewalk in addition to the trail? Or can we count that trail, the sidewalk, if we widen it as the trail that's required by zoning? I mean, I guess that would be a zoning determination, but just wanted to open up on your thoughts and your recommendations. And so we did receive the review letter. I don't know there's anything in too much detail. I think I kind of hit on the highlights of what we wanted to talk about. The fact that this is a parking lot, not roadway, the second access through the Recreation Authority land, the trails and sidewalk, I think were the main items that I had highlighted from Steve's review. So.
You know what, would you mind just rolling through the review? Will complies or anything that doesn't need discussion, just give a will comply or understood.
Okay. Yeah, number one's a will comply item for just outlining the use as a B10 use and condominium ownership. Number two is talking about the second access to the Joint Recreation Authority. I gave you the update there.
What's planning commission members' thoughts on that access, if you can obtain that access? I mean, what's the likelihood of you obtaining this access? I mean, how far are your discussions with Holiday House?
Back in December.
Have to go to the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go to the microphone. I'm sorry. My fault.
There's two about the parallel.
Yeah, that was my question as well.
I think two is about the parallel access, the 20-foot wide grass pavers parallel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's correct. That's,
Right. Just the.
Yeah, I agree.
Same.
yeah.
So, all right, let's
Right. The other one's good.
Come up with the paragraph by saying, we understand they're in discussions with.
Okay.
all right. So go ahead. What's your name again? I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's Brian Grant with
Brian.
Salt Properties.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, Brian.
Good to see everybody again tonight. So I met with the Joint Recreation Authority back at their December meeting. So I had an initial meeting with them to revisit the sanitary sewer easement. And then also I presented this sketch here to show them a proposed emergency access through their property. Of course, it was a brand new concept to them. So I don't think they even had a full a meeting staff there. So they asked me to come back. I'm due to go back before them in February. I'll be back before Hal Shermer and his team back in February to continue that conversation. So But just more than anything, wanted to demonstrate that, we'd heard the request and that was an option that we're pursuing. In
Okay.
addition to providing a second access on our site.
What's the distance between Holiday House Road and Lot 18? To be the farthest unit.
What are those 20-foot width? What are these widths units? Just guessing. You got your setback here, right? You got, that's the overall distance.
Right.
So you got 50,
650 feet, maybe 600. Something like that.
you got 360 and 410, and then whatever in between. Right?
Yeah.
410, so 450 roughly, just if I did that math real quick, if these are 20-foot units.
That gets you out to Holiday House Road, correct?
From 18
To the right of way.
to the right of way, yeah.
What do you mean right away? The Holiday House Road.
Could be an additional distance from the right of way.
Say 500 feet for.
Yeah,
discussion
round
purposes.
numbers, yeah.
Not much. There's not much difference between the right of way and the actual paved cartway.
And then the distance, so then that explains why you have the path through to the Holiday House parking lot is to keep that distance to 500 feet. So that it's not that plus the distance to get out to Washington Avenue, which would create the total length of the cul-de-sac.
Again, it's designed as a parking lot, not as a cul-de-sac. So I don't know that the cul-de-sac requirements apply. I mean, it's a parking lot. It's a driveway with a parking lot. Same as if this were apartment buildings and you had 30 apartments in a building and a parking lot. It's the same concept.
That's a matter of semantics. What it is for house number 18, they only have one path out. So whether you call it a cul-de-sac or dead end street or whatever you want, it's,
They have two paths out. They have emergency access out to Holiday House and the main access out to Holiday House. That's one of the requirements of the age restricted is that there's two access points for emergency vehicles in and out.
When I read the definitions, it said driveway to parking area or a garage or a structure. I don't know, it just seems as if stretching that definition a little bit.
yes.
Let me just jump in on that a little bit. I understand your point. I certainly did not review this as it were a parking area. In part, I think we need to look at that closer internally with the township. If you recall with the THP development, we had a lot of issues over those were private roads and what standards they had to meet and whether they had to establish rights of way on them. I believe it went to the zoning hearing board for an interpretation of the ordinance, and it was denied, essentially upholding that they had established rights of way as a public street standard because the ordinance says that they have to be privately owned, but public street standards. So we won't have an answer to that tonight, but I'll tell you, I think from the township standpoint, I'll have to get the solicitor involved and look at that issue a little bit closer. That said, I think point taken of the distance to get out and yes, the driveway through the Holiday House pool property essentially eliminates that question of an extended cul-de-sac length. And if they are successful in getting that easement and getting that driveway, I don't know that paver driveway, 40 feet off of the existing entrance makes any bit of difference at all.
It's a zoning requirement.
But I think it's, for the fire department to comment on. Well, it couldn't be grass pavers because by ordinance, it has to be a paved paved surface for the secondary access. But I think, you know, it'd be good to get fire company comment whether that they think that they would use that and use it in that location or want something different.
Kind of in a similar vein, is there merit to having the Holiday House driveway access line up with the emergency access or the driveway? As opposed to being a third point out there?
Correct. Yeah, there would, you would think there'd be preferable to line up. But you don't want it to be unnecessarily used either, so
Yeah,
sometimes
right,
you
that's what
line
I was
things
gonna-
up and people use the access that you don't want them to use.
Yeah, with any bit of luck, that access never needs to be used.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that access, the location of it is just there because that's where you talked in the past about where the sewer line was gonna be.
That's correct.
So potentially it could move a little bit. I don't know if there was any physical feature that mandated it to be right there. The fire company wanted it to line up.
Yeah, it was a spin-off of our sanitary series, and then the alignment was coming into this parking area here, so I seemed to make the most sense.
Yeah, we're just trying to minimize the impact to the Recreation Authority and use the sanitary sewer easement that was,
Sanitary sewer easement wasn't for this development. It was for two houses that were there to connect them when that was first proposed. So we had no target, you know, where a driveway was going to be or a road was going to be.
that's correct. I'm just
Yeah,
explaining why it is where it is.
I understand if it was a road and you're trying to align on either side of a street, I could see that being, you know, a more logical progression, but for something that's an emergency, I don't know that they necessarily need to be aligned.
Right, but we'd also have to see that the fire company could get in there, make that turn and make,
Right.
you know, make a right-hand turn, make a left-hand turn to get back into the development if they use that.
I just wanted to bring that possibility up. If you're going to be negotiating
Sure.
with them in the interim, so it was something to think about.
Yeah, maybe worth, you know, having that discussion with the fire company and whatnot before you finalize anything with the joint rec authority.
So Steve, did you say that the emergency access by zoning is required to be paved?
Believe so, or it may be in the subdivision ordinance. I think I referenced it.
I know the zoning
Oh,
ord,
it says the secondary access should be built to township standard. Again, is a reference to either, you know, subdivision ordinance, what our street standards are, or you know, some variation of that the township would agree to.
Right. And you claimed that you didn't think the secondary access would, the emergency access would be necessary with the way they have this laid out?
Well, I guess I question whether
The necessity?
beneficial just being that distance off, but I refer, you know, or defer judgment to the fire company if they think they could use that if there's a problem in that. I mean, there is somebody to it. If there's a problem in that first block of townhouses, you know, that would effectively block the way out.
Right.
And folks could use that other entrance. So, I guess I was more in the mindset of it's only whatever it is, 40, 50 feet up Holiday House Road. So
Right.
without the access through the Joint Rec Authority, it probably does minimal good. With the access through the Joint Rec Authority, seems to be a better scheme altogether.
it's also a requirement, part of the age restricted use requires two accesses for emergency vehicles. So that was another reason that it was proposed, because we'd have to get a variance to not put the second access in. Oh, the list, keep going. All right.
All right.
Lost focus there.
So that was number 2.
Number 2. Number 3, open space. We'll delineate it, show it more clearly what we're proposing. We agree with the descriptions here within this comment. We'll just get it shown more clearly. Number 4, that's the trails. That's the one we were talking about. It says multipurpose trails are required to be developed through the open space. So I guess it's a zoning ordinance, so it's really not up to your determination. I guess if you want to give any recommendations to us, if we would want to go for a variance to eliminate. Impervious coverage is also tight on this site, so that's all going to come into play. So if you had the trail, do you think we need the sidewalk around both sides of the loop as well?
Well, I think you'd want sidewalk for the community. Doesn't have to be 8 feet wide.
Right. If we had the trail, it would get reduced to probably 5 feet. But I'm hearing you'd like to see the trail and the sidewalk.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
I would, yeah. I mean, I'd
Walk
like
on
to.
both sides, at least to the P, maybe get rid of sidewalk on one side of the straight leg. Like at the entrance there.
Yeah, that's one of the things we were looking at originally.
Why don't you just make it a U?
Well, yeah, I think instead of a
I
P,
mean,
make it a U,
right.
but in terms of a trail, I mean, where's it go? And you said this is an age restricted community.
The trail would just go behind the units. I mean, there's not much you can do with it, and what good is that?
Yeah, I
That
agree
was
with
our
you. It's like-
response. That's why we proposed that, making the sidewalk an 8-foot wide sidewalk so that you could have multiple people walking without any issues around the community. We didn't think going in and clearing any further woodlands would make any sense to put a trail just to run behind the unit. That was,
I tend to agree.
Yeah, plus then there's access. Hooligans and stuff.
Those hooligans that creep over from the.
So you'd have to look for a variance.
Again, I think on the THP property, we had a portion of that, we'll call it off-road trail or through the open space was a natural trail. It was like a wood chip trail through the trees. It wasn't clearing trees to get around. And, there might be some opportunity in that back open space area there. Not necessarily you run it behind all the units, but you come off of the end of the parking area and just do a loop within the wooded areas there.
we can look
Yeah, I'm not sure
We're watching trails.
what it says about paving it, but I know we did that in the THP development. They sort of had both. They had some paved areas and they had some natural light there.
Then I guess I know you mentioned that impervious was tight, but if you can't use the grass pavers for that emergency access and it has to be paved, is there any reason it couldn't be another entrance? Just a full blown, like Tim said, make it.
It's all go-
instead of a P?
Yeah, it's all going to come down to if they're viewed as a road with right of ways, you're going to need waivers from distance between intersections and things like that. Distance between driveways. No, physically, I see the practicality of just running a second access out. And in fact, we could probably make them one way, in and loop around. I think that may be something, and you can have some additional parking, off-street parking in there. Yeah, narrow the roads a little bit, have angled parking coming in and looping around. I think that's something that can be done if the planning commission thinks that's a better design. We can look into that and work with Steve's office to understand what relief is going to be needed for that. And hopefully it's not zoning, it's waivers.
Yeah, it would seem to make sense if you have to go through the trouble of making that emergency access right there up to standard.
I think still would be worthwhile to get the fire department's commentary.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Yep. All right, moving on. 5, 6, 7 are all will comply. 7B is talking about woodlands out there, and the overgrown woodlands. We did do a site visit. My landscape architect went out and walked the site to verify that there are no new woodlands grown up Um, so, obviously, as part of the preliminary plan, we'll vet that out. Eight's,
And just to clarify, I wasn't necessarily worried about there being new woodlands as opposed to just clarifying on the plan of what meets the definition of woodlands and what is just overgrown areas on the site.
eight will comply. 9, same thing, will comply. 10s will comply, driveways. 11, that's the issue of streets versus parking lot. Um, C, 11C has to do with sidewalk, and I guess improvements to Holiday House Road. I guess that's something we should discuss at this point. Obviously, we would be obligated to do the frontage improvements along Holiday House for what's in our frontage, from our property down to Washington Avenue would be an off-site improvement at this point. So, you have any thoughts on that?
Is there any curb or sidewalk out on Washington, that intersection?
Yes.
Yes,
There is.
Definitely sidewalk on the opposite side.
yes.
On the
And
school
on,
side.
Yeah.
and on the joint rec authority side, but not along the existing homes and above Holiday House. But we had this discussion with the prior layout.
We
And
did.
it's only whatever it is, 16 feet, 15 feet at best, so
Yeah.
you can't pass 2 cars to get to the development, which then has roads that you could pass. Or, whether or not it needs full, curb and sidewalk. That's a question, but widening the cartway would be preferable.
Right.
Get full access. We did talk about sidewalk with the prior plan. I left it in here. At the time, that was a question of if kids would walk to school.
Exactly.
This is now an age restricted community, but there's other facilities over there. There's the trail through the rear of Penn Foundation that goes all the way to
Right.
to Lawn Avenue. And, to walk into town or wherever you want to go.
One item to consider is if we do have the access through the joint rec facility, authority property, that could be used as a trail as well for pedestrian access, in that direction over to the recreation authority,
Wasn't it,
as opposed to bringing them out to Washington and,
wasn't it somewhere there where the trail was thought to be coming from Lawn Avenue over back behind there and come out through the school to Holiday House? There was a conversation about the
Yeah, it comes.
sidewalk coming along Lawn Avenue across the
did the
intersection and then
Yeah.
You can
Right.
see it on this aerial plan. The trail through the rear of Penn Foundation comes out almost at the intersection of Holiday House.
okay, that's it there.
That might,
Because that would then allow access from there, the age restricted over to hospital over here, that whole.
Yeah. Yeah, that white line that goes to the bottom of the page, that's a trail that goes all the way through Penn Foundation. Lawn Avenue.
all right, that's something we'll work with Steve's office on. I think we'll probably have to do a site visit and go through where we can widen and not widen. There's a lot of poles, a lot of utilities along there, so.
And I think I made reference to it in my letter. I believe there's additional right of way available on the Holiday House side of the street. Obviously, there's no room on that for the existing houses. His garage is practically, in Holiday House Road. And I think his well sits right there too. That's where the well truck got stuck off the road. That's right on the edge of the road. So there's no room on that side to go, but I believe there is available right of way on the Holiday House road side of the street.
All right, moving on, E's P loop, it's a street thing, E and F. I'm assuming traffic calming, with a revised layout possibly of going one way. U Street, I don't know that traffic calming is needed. Does the planning commission have any thoughts on that? I don't know that we'd have any crosswalks really.
Yeah, we throw that into every development, as a question now, depending on what you ultimately end up with. really just crosswalk where they're gonna be.
12, we just talked about widening a Holiday House down to Washington. 13, traffic study, that's, will comply. 14, again, it's possibly a waiver, it's driveway distance from the intersection. We're really viewing it as a parking lot, but we can work through that.
What did we ever come up with the TH behind the hospital? I know we had that same issue,
Which issue?
the 60-foot from the intersection.
Driveway. They made some modifications to make it as best as they could, put it that way. It was a discussion back and forth with the traffic engineer. It will in part be an issue of whether it's a street or a parking lot. So that could go away. And it would go away if it was a use street. If it was
One-way use street, then
It was one-way use street, it goes
Yeah,
away. It goes away totally with no matter what you.
All right, 15, stormwaters will comply. 16, 17 is the sewer and water. Those are all will comply.
This one's a given.
Yeah, right. You finally got one.
Um,
Assuming the borough wants to go up.
Yeah, right.
and the rest, 18 through 21 are all will comply items.
So we'll do a little more tweaking on this one, on some of the layout, and I think then probably resubmit back
Yeah, I
in.
think internally,
Mhm. Well, I think maybe you'd want to see us with the redesigned or revised layout first before you have that discussion, because I think it might look even more like a parking lot when you do one-way U with angled parking coming in. Picture says 1,000 words.
start talking.
Okay. All right. And then probably look to see if we can put a naturalized trail into the open space in some usable fashion. So that'll address that issue as well. And then,
Pickleball courts.
Cricket, limited usage facility.
right. And remember, you also want to have low fees for the homeowner. So you don't want to start loading up with lots of maintenance items internally. So.
Yeah, again, the PHP project. Whether it's watching ball or
I think
Whatever.
at that point, we kind of said, show something, but the HOA could
Yeah.
decide what it was going
Yeah.
to be.
reserved an area that could be level
We can do that.
and then, made it so the HOA could put in whatever they wanted.
Put it right in the middle where the angled spots are going in the parking lot. Make it like a sport court. Lights. No evening lights. So,
Lights are always.
I know. So, all right. So let us do a little more refinement, have some more discussions, and if there's any other questions.
Again, your conversation. They basically just want you to come back in because they weren't fully staffed for that meeting.
That's correct. Well, I think that and the fact that the concept and the request was just, coming out of, it was an initial request. I mean, I had reached out to Hal initially to let him know a request to be put on the agenda for that night, but I think for the rest of the Recreation Authority, that was the first blush at even hearing the request.
Okay.
And I think there might have been a couple other members that weren't present, so I think they wanted to discuss it, digest it, and I asked them when would be a good time to come back, and they said, skip January and come back to us in February.
All right. No, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, do the same. Thank you.
there's a public comment.
Oh, yeah. Any public comment on these projects? If so, gotta go to the podium. All right, thanks for that. All right, so moving on, I buried my agenda.
I get two.
I got two. I got two. Got two and I can't find either one. There we go. All right. Old business. I don't have any old business. Anyone have any old business? Besides comp plan discussions, which I don't want to get into tonight. Anyone have any old business? Okay.
I get, my concern is still with the kind of piecemeal approach to what the overall master plan is and why they want to push more to not Milford. The Augustine Road, that one I think is even more obtuse than the one at, Bridge and Lawn Avenue. I mean, I measured it out from the Augustine Road site on a straight line to Lawn and Ridge. It's at about a half mile. And it's uphill. And I don't know what kind of sewer facilities that Percy would propose that would pump sewage a half mile uphill just to get to the ability to go downhill to get to their pumping station under 309, and how in the long run that would benefit these residents versus being fed from Telford, which would obviously in that case be downhill from Augustine Road.
Yeah, and what's the advantage of going, like, if you came in the back down 309, you know, some easement or something coming that way, where's the benefit for the rest of the village? Right? Failing systems are up on the ridge. You know, so do you come out the ridge and go down Augustine to do that? Well, now that whole village is now somehow serviced by a revised 537 with Percy taking over service for Telford.
As we discussed before, it's a complicated issue, and I guess to some degree, it may be a sort of a joint venture. I think Telford's going to retain Telford's area, Percy is going to retain their area, but they may overlap the conveyance, we'll say. That said, I know Telford has had some interest in crossing. Well, North Penn Water Authority is going to cross 309 with their water main at Almont Road. And I believe North Penn has some interest in bringing sewer across. Not North Penn. Telford has interest in bringing sewer across Almont Road when they bring the water line across. So then Telford will have some direct service to that area. Still probably wouldn't still probably wouldn't be gravity to this site, but it would be closer and it'd probably be done with low pressure force main. But again, that's all kind of hearsay, and we don't know for sure until, you know, they sit down with the authorities and come back with a overall plan of what they want to do.
If Telford stubbed underneath and came across that Almont Road with sewer, would then they'd be able to take care of the sanitary sewer for the southeastern corner of the Lawn Avenue Ridge Road, the townhome triangle there, and the property behind Passagios?
It would still be difficult for them to get back over to that triangle property. Unless they pumped it.
Because they'd have to cross 309 again.
They have to come back, yeah. Well, or
Well, across Lawn Avenue. Yeah, across.
I said, there's a bigger scope to it all. Select owns property, you know, opposite that triangle on Lawn and Ridge, you know, behind the restaurant, between the restaurant and the ramp to southbound, which we haven't seen any sketch plan yet, but that needs to be considered in the mix if you're running utility line somewhere.
Speaking of that property, what did they run through there? Coming the back, that back access point, there's something that was trenched in through, comes over.
Yeah, I don't know. I did see some flagging there and it looked like a trench, but I haven't asked
A
anybody.
bunch of clearing back.
Well, they planted corn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they cultivated and planted corn. And, but yeah, they trenched something that came from over towards Passagios Way to Lawn Avenue. Is there like an old culvert in there? Like, so it's hard to see.
Franklin was here, but
Although I was sitting at the traffic light for like 3 minutes. So, just looking at it, yeah.
we'll find out.
So, yeah.
Until the guy behind you started beeping.
No, it was still red because it doesn't, it was still red. So,
I know it was a cable line up to the house.
yeah, it was pretty big, look, but I don't know. So I just saw.
Laugh. But that, that needs to come into play too. Unless they have no intent to develop it, but why would they buy it to bid? So, yeah, there is the bigger picture. I would agree with them that they could do it, on a parallel track. They could make the initial submissions to the township and say, this is the scheme that we want to use, at the same time submit a subdivision plan. Generally, everybody does that, but I agree with the planning commission. You wouldn't want to keep moving forward with the subdivision plans and having, even though, probably technically under the MPC, you could make sewer and water a condition of the preliminary plan. This is so, I don't want to say messy, but it's not intuitive of where the sewer is going to go.
Well, I'd like to see what their overall plan for it is.
Yeah.
I mean, just to say that's where it's going is one thing, but
John's been saying too the whole time, and it's a valid point, good point.
Well,
Look at this thing.
I mean, last month's presentation for the, where Telford came in and talked about their little extension on County Line Road. To be honest, that was an eye opener for me. I'd never heard of pressurized sewer system.
That's crazy. They got the grant for that, I saw.
yeah,
Did they?
very common anymore. Low pressure grinder pumps and
Does that work?
one way valve.
Yeah, but what happens if if you say you have failures within
Yes.
pressurized system? What if, one or two pumps, is that enough to fail the whole
Well,
system?
each pump
No.
is associated with one source, one
Right,
house.
no, I understand that, but I'm just saying the whole thing together becomes this low pressure force main. right?
Yes.
Right, but the individual pump could move all the water in the line. So if one person's pump fails, it's just their house fails, they can't connect.
It's solids and everything.
Everything.
So they're-
Well,
They
They're
grind-
grinder.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bit of a settling tank. It's almost like a little bit of a holding of a
Like a
septic tank.
septic tank with a pump in it.
with a grinder. Yeah, we have them, well, down on Clymer Avenue or off of the original Providence. Right, other than a few pump failures over the years. They've been around for a long time, not necessarily that prevalent
Yeah.
in this
that's
area.
The first time I had ever heard.
But they did get the grant for it. So there's Craig Statt's letter came, it said that there's.
Yeah, I
grants. They
saw it.
went through it. It said.
Yeah,
Hidden Meadows, Telford Borough Authority plan was 216,000.
$2 million.
Or two, I'm sorry, 2.1 million or
Right.
something.
But my thought as a follow-up to that was, for pick on the Augustine Road one is, to my limited knowledge, what they're proposing, this little island of 9 homes with a half-mile run uphill to get to their next potential development. I think it's worth a discussion is, okay, that's fine. That's what you want to do if you wanted to go to Percy. Now, what would Telford do? And I think you need to look at, what are we setting a trap for who's ever going to move into these 9 homes and, maybe they don't have success and they're having pump failures and valve failures. And is that in the long run, is that more beneficial to them than if they were served by a gravity fed system that went in the other direction? So I think there's, as much as there's a legal discussion, I think there needs to be some technical
But
consolidations.
even more to your point, I think, the fact that deals with those 9 homes.
Well, yes,
What
yeah.
about everything?
What about
else on
everybody
the
else?
street?
Yeah, you got pipes running in opposite directions.
And that leads to the developer, as much as they sort of drive the development, they can't lead the authority to how they're going to serve the properties. As you said, the authority has, is primary factor to determine how they want to serve that area. And they shouldn't serve one development to the detriment of all the other properties. Right.
Well, what's the appetite? What's the appetite for the modification of the 537?
I have no idea because we have, until they show something, the board hasn't discussed it. But that's also why I say, I think there's going to be this inter cooperative agreement that they're not necessarily going to change areas. They're just, take for instance, Old Bethlehem Pike, where we also have that Act 537 plan in. Not as imminent as the Hidden Valley one, obviously, because there's no grant for it. But that has to go through East Rock Hill because they're the only ones that have sewer lines in the area. but the properties in West Rock Hill will be Percy Regional Authority customers. And the flow will flow through the East Rock Hill line under an agreement that East Rock Hill signed with Percy. They're not changing service areas, but Percy has an agreement which allows their flow to go through an East Rock Hill line with a certain payment and a bunch of provisions that go along with it. And something to that effect could be worked out, you know, in the Lawn Avenue, Ridge Road area, to where they keep their own sides of the street, they keep their own customers, but they have an agreement of how they convey the flow.
What's the time frame realistically of something like that? Get everything,
12 to 18 months, I'd guess, for a revised Act 537.
Yeah. And if they actually wanted to change service areas, then it's probably longer.
just on the paperwork.
Yeah.
But then the build outside and all that type of thing, I mean, that's. They're
Another year.
In terms of old business, that was all I had.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, moving on to new business. I have no new business.
have any new stuff coming in next month?
Well, we did get the preliminary plan for the big Lawn Avenue development. We are in the middle of putting our review letter together, and you know, the big question is going to be, will the planning commission move forward with that without having this planning module? That's where the comes the shove on that sewer issue is gonna be. I don't think we have anything else.
Has there been any interest in the Wawa property in the corner there?
Not that I've heard.
Okay.
And you folks might have heard the warehouse at 3115 Old State Road. They're coming back in for a new zoning variance.
What's the variance?
Well, they got a variance for 45-foot height.
Did they?
There's a new potential buyer that's looking for 51.
Name isn't Durstein, is it?
It could be.
He's looking at the old State Road site?
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
But they've applied, the original property owners applied for a variance. 51.
He got 45, now he wants 51, but he applied for it already.
Yes,
Okay.
I don't think the meeting has been scheduled yet, but,
What's another?
oh, okay, maybe the day after.
What's the square footage on that one?
They were changing the square footage a little bit to, it's something over 150,000. It might be 160, 170. It's less than 200,000. There was a couple other minor variances that go along with this change.
Are these warehouses sort of running out of favor because they're now overstocked, oversupplied?
I've heard both. I wouldn't say running out of favor. I'd say the owners are less likely to build them on spec. They'll get their approvals and wait for a tenant. Like Veris has put the brakes on their project. They're still getting finalizing all their approvals and, you know, to be ready to go at some point.
Right.
But they don't have an imminent start date. On the other hand, Triple Net told us, you know, finish our agreements. We want to get started. I don't know whether they have a tenant or not, but so some of them are plowing ahead and some of them are holding back a little bit.
Because it seems like more and more of them, when I drive by, there's, big signs out front, space available.
I've also heard the stories, you know, over the past couple years that it's hard to get a tenant when you don't have something for them to look at. No one wants to lease a space that is a empty
It's a
piece of
playground.
ground. It's gonna take 2 years until they can move into it. So there's a bit of a, you know, half dozen one six of the other of attracting a tenant to a property that doesn't exist yet.
I did start looking at that thing I'd sent around about Penn Futures and their model ordinance with regard to logistics. I haven't gotten very far through that, but I know there's a big push up in the Poconos to protect water quality. But
We did, East Rock Hill is updating their zoning ordinance and, the solicitor over there, same office, but different person. We did go through the Penn Futures and they're not doing a total rewrite of the ordinance, so we're gonna pick and choose a couple things to beef up the East Rock Hill ordinance with respect to the larger warehouse. Over there, though, they only have one spot that's, you know, around the airports, they're only industrial zone, and that's the only place it could be, and the airport owns all the property, so either he's gonna build more warehouses or there's not gonna be any. Whereas in the township, you have a little bit more property available.
All right. No, nothing on your pending approval sheet that we need to know about?
I don't, think so. Like I said, we'll have a preliminary review for the main property on Long Avenue. Oh, and still waiting for, the Rich Hill Road, the Adelphia property to come back. And I issued a review on that, but they never came into the meeting. They took themselves off the agenda.
Adelphia.
Yeah, they bought the house next to,
Yeah.
and now they're subdividing. It's actually getting smaller. The original plan implied that it was gonna be 3 lots, but now they're saying, well, one of the lots they actually want to merge with the compressor station property, keep the house separate. And the third lot is actually across the street, which is effectively a lot now.
Right,
It
right.
just happens to be on the same deed with all the
Right.
property. They're trying to clean that plan up.
Any public comment? Okay, seeing none. Get a motion to adjourn.
I make said motion.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Adjourn. Vote? No.